When I was younger, I had this clear vision of how my life would unfold. I used to sit in my room, dreaming about the future. It was always some version of success, an image of me with a good job, a house I could be proud of, and maybe even a family someday. I had big plans, you know? A career where I was respected, making money, living comfortably, and doing the things I'd always dreamed of. I thought all of that was within reach if I just worked hard enough. I remember thinking that if I put in the effort, success would come. That I'd climb the ladder, make the right connections, and have everything fall into place. I had these grand visions of the man I was supposed to be, someone strong, someone driven, someone who knew exactly what they wanted and how to get it. But that was before reality set in. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that version of myself. Maybe it was my first real job, or maybe it was when I first realized that things weren't as easy as I'd imagined. Work became this cycle, just trying to stay afloat, just trying to keep my head above water. My career didn't take off the way I thought it would. I was working in a place where the potential I'd hoped for seemed just out of reach. It wasn't a bad job, but it was never what I imagined when I was dreaming as a teenager. I thought by my 30s I'd have a nice house, a career I was proud of, and maybe even some financial freedom. But at 45, I found myself barely scraping by, living paycheck to paycheck. I was still renting a small apartment that felt more like a temporary stop than a place I could call home. The car I drove was old, more of a get me from point A to point B kind of car. It wasn't glamorous, but it was functional. And that's what I had settled for. The things I'd once wanted seemed out of reach, like some distant dream that I could never quite touch. Then there was Emma. I had hoped that when I met someone, it would all come together. Maybe I wasn't exactly where I wanted to be in life. But with the right partner, things would make sense. I'd find someone who understood my struggles, who would share my dreams and ambitions, and we'd build something together. I thought we'd be a team, working toward the same goals, helping each other reach the life we both envisioned. And for a while, Emma and I were that team. At first, it felt like everything was going to plan. She was ambitious, driven. She had everything I thought I was supposed to have. She was climbing the corporate ladder, making money, looking confident and sharp in everything she did. And I was still stuck in the same place I had been for years. At first, I convinced myself I didn't mind. I told myself that her success didn't bother me, that it was good for both of us. After all, she deserved it. She was smart, hardworking, and talented. I was proud of her, truly. But over time, that pride turned into something else. It was jealousy, frustration, maybe even fear. Fear that I wasn't enough. Fear that, no matter how hard I tried, I would never catch up to the life I had imagined. It wasn't just about my career. It was about everything. I watched Emma build her life, creating opportunities, growing her social circle, excelling in ways that I could only dream of. And I was left feeling like I was watching her from a distance. Like I couldn't quite catch up. There were nights when I would lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering where I went wrong. How did I end up here? Was I failing at everything? My career? My marriage? Was I even the man I thought I was supposed to be? The worst part was, I couldn't talk about it with her. I couldn't admit to Emma that I felt like I was fading into the background, that I was losing myself. It felt like I was supposed to have everything together by now. But I didn't. And the more I tried to push forward, the further I seemed to drift away from the person I'd hoped to become. I had built this life in my head, a life of success, stability, and happiness. But somewhere along the way, I lost it. And I didn't know how to get it back. Emma has this clarity about her life. She knows what she wants, and she goes after it with everything she's got. I admire her for it, but sometimes it feels like I'm watching her move ahead while I'm standing still. It's not just her career either. It's everything. Her friends, her social life, her hobbies. She's got a plan for everything, and I don't even know what I want anymore. I'm not stupid. I know she loves me. But sometimes I wonder if I'm enough for her. I mean, when you're with someone like Emma, who's constantly improving, constantly pushing herself forward, it's hard not to feel like you're holding her back. I can't even remember the last time we talked about my dreams or what I wanted. It's like everything in our life revolves around her success, and I'm just along for the ride. I used to think I could catch up. I used to think I could become the man I wanted to be if I just tried harder. But now, I'm starting to think maybe it's not about trying harder. Maybe it's about realizing that I'm not the same person I thought I was going to be. Maybe I'm not the man I want to be, and that's hard to admit. Emma deserves someone who's as driven as she is. Someone who can match her energy, her ambition. And deep down, I'm scared that I'll never be that guy. I just feel like I'm too far behind, and no matter how hard I try, I can't catch up. I didn't realize how much it was eating me up until one day I snapped. We were sitting at dinner, just the two of us, and she was talking about her promotion at work, how her boss was really impressed with her, how she was getting more responsibility. It should have been a proud moment for me, but all I could think about was how I was stuck in the same dead-end job, day after day, with no real progress. I tried to hide it, tried to smile and act like it didn't bother me. But inside, something broke. It wasn't even the promotion itself. It was the realization that I was so far behind, and I couldn't even pretend to keep up anymore. The more she talked, the more I felt like a failure. I couldn't keep living like this. The tension, the guilt, the feeling that I was holding Emma back, it all came to a head one evening. I couldn't hide from it anymore, couldn't pretend everything was fine. We were sitting on the couch, her flipping through her phone, talking about a work event she had coming up. I was just sitting there, my mind racing, feeling like I was sinking deeper and deeper, and then I said it. Maybe we should take a break. I didn't mean to say it. It just came out. But once the words were out, I couldn't take them back. Emma looked at me, confused. What do you mean? I had to say it though. I had to be honest. I love you, but I don't think I'm the man you need me to be. I'm not enough for you. You've got this amazing future ahead of you, and I'm just holding you back. I'm not good enough, Emma. I'm stuck in a place you're not. I can't keep pretending that I'm okay when I'm not. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing I've ever felt. She didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, she just looked at me, her eyes filled with sadness, and said, I don't want to lose you, Tom, but I don't know how to help you if you won't help yourself. I knew she was right. I knew that by staying in the relationship, I was doing nothing but dragging us both down. And honestly, I think we both felt it, even if we didn't want to admit it. I could see the frustration in her eyes, the weariness. She wasn't the same person she used to be when we first met. And neither was I. That night, we made the hardest decision we'd ever made. We broke up. It felt like my heart was being ripped out. But I knew deep down it was the only way. I couldn't keep living in her shadow, and I couldn't keep pretending I was okay with who I was. If I was ever going to become the man I wanted to be, I needed to face this on my own. It wasn't just about our relationship anymore. It was about my own growth, and maybe even my own survival. As I walked out that night, I thought about everything I'd lost. But I also thought about the chance I had now. The chance to finally change. After the breakup, I was in a daze. It wasn't just losing Emma that hit me, it was everything that had built up to this point. I had all this time to sit with myself, to think about where I went wrong. But thinking about it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. I didn't have anyone else to distract me, no one to blame but myself. And it stung. A lot. I spent the first few days in a bit of a fog, not knowing what to do with myself. I had no routine, no plan. I was just kind of existing. The first thing I did was dig out an old journal, the one I used to write in when I was younger, when I had dreams that actually felt possible. I started writing down all the things I hated about myself, all the reasons I thought I wasn't enough. But that didn't help. It just made me feel worse. I had to stop. I had to force myself to get out of that hole. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I got up and went for a run. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I didn't feel great afterward, but I didn't feel as horrible either. It was a small victory, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Over the next few weeks, I tried to keep the momentum going. I signed up for a career development course. It was something I'd been putting off for years, but I figured it was time to stop talking about what I could do and actually start doing it. Every day, I forced myself to sit down and study, even when I didn't want to. Even when it felt pointless. But the self-doubt never went away. It kept nagging at me, whispering that I wasn't good enough, that I was too old to change. Some days, I just wanted to throw in the towel. And there were moments when I thought about calling Emma, asking her to come back, telling her I'd changed, that I could fix everything. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the point. It wasn't about getting her back anymore. It was about finding a way to look at myself and say, I'm proud of who I'm becoming. So, I kept going. Slowly, painfully, I kept moving forward. A few months went by, and honestly, I wasn't sure if anything was really changing. I felt like I was doing all the right things, taking courses, hitting the gym more often, trying to build some kind of routine, but I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. It was hard not to look at my old life and think about how much I'd lost. But then, one day, something small happened. I was at work, and my boss called me into his office. I thought I was in trouble at first, thought maybe my performance had slipped more than I realized. But instead, he told me that he had been impressed with how I'd been handling my projects lately. He said I was more focused, more proactive, and that they were looking to give me more responsibility. It wasn't a huge promotion or anything, but it was something. I remember sitting there, staring at him for a moment, not sure if I'd heard him right. I wasn't used to hearing anything positive about my work. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. That night, I went home and actually smiled. I hadn't done that in a while. I cooked myself dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and just let myself feel proud. It was a small victory, but it felt huge to me. For the first time in months, I felt like I was on the right track. Like maybe I was finally starting to make the changes I'd been trying to force for so long. I still had a long way to go, but it didn't feel as impossible anymore. It wasn't about some grand, overnight transformation. It was about these little moments. And I knew if I could keep stringing those together, things might just turn around after all. It felt good to finally start seeing the effort pay off. And for the first time in a while, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could still become the man I was meant to be. A few months after that little victory at work, something unexpected happened. I ran into Emma. It wasn't planned, not by any means. I was out at a coffee shop one morning, sipping my coffee and reading a book, trying to enjoy the quiet of the day. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just letting myself have a moment of peace. And then, there she was, Emma. She walked in, and for a second I froze. It was like time stopped. She didn't see me right away, so I had a moment to just watch her. She was still the same, but there was something different about her too. She looked happy. Really happy. I didn't know what to do. My heart was racing. It wasn't like I hadn't thought about her. Of course I had. But seeing her face to face again brought up so many feelings. Most of them that I wasn't ready to deal with. I didn't know if I was ready to face her, to explain myself, or even to just be around her again. She finally saw me, and I saw the surprise in her eyes. I think she was as caught off guard as I was. But then she smiled. It wasn't the same smile we had when we were in the middle of our best times. It was softer, more cautious, maybe. "Tom," she said, her voice warm but careful. "It's been a while." We sat down and talked for over an hour, and to be honest, it was the first time I felt like I was really talking to her in a long time. Not as a husband, not as someone who was afraid of being judged, but just as two people who had once shared something real. We didn't talk about the breakup at first. We just caught up. She told me about her life, about work, about new things she was trying. And I told her about mine, about the changes I'd been making, about the course I'd taken, about the new routine I'd been sticking to. I could tell she was surprised. but also proud, maybe even a little impressed. At some point, we both stopped talking and just sat there, taking it all in. And in that silence, I realized something. I hadn't changed for her. I hadn't done all this work to try to win her back. I'd done it for myself. But it felt good to know that she could see it, that she could see the man I was becoming. It wasn't like things went back to normal. They couldn't. But something shifted. Maybe it was the first real step toward healing. Not just for me, but for us. We didn't talk about getting back together, and that was okay. I wasn't ready for that anyway. But I felt something in that conversation that I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Maybe we could both move forward, whether together or apart, and still be okay. After that meeting with Emma, I went through a kind of emotional roller coaster. It was clear that we were both in very different places now. She had her own life, her own plans, and I had mine. But that encounter left me with something I hadn't expected, a sense of closure, or at least a sense that I was heading in the right direction. I knew that I had to stop living in the past. I couldn't keep looking back at the version of me that had let things fall apart. I had to focus on who I was becoming now. Over the next few weeks, I kept working on myself. I threw myself into my career, found new hobbies, and focused on getting better physically and mentally. It wasn't easy. Some days, it felt like I was fighting a war inside myself. Old habits die hard, and that inner voice telling me I wasn't enough still popped up from time to time. But every time it did, I fought it. I reminded myself that I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to keep showing up and doing the work. I also started to realize something important. I wasn't just building a new life for myself. I was learning to appreciate the life I had, the one I'd almost thrown away. I didn't need to be some big success to be happy. I just needed to be true to who I was, to honor my own journey. I had spent so much time comparing myself to others, especially Emma, and it had blinded me to the beauty in my own life. One night, I sat down and wrote Emma a letter. Not a letter about regrets or begging her to come back, but a letter where I thanked her. Thanked her for all the good times, for the love we shared, and for showing me the things I needed to change. It felt like the right way to close that chapter in my life. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't need one. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about me letting go of the past so I could fully embrace my future. A few days later, I received a text from her. She told me she'd read my letter and that she was glad I'd found peace. It wasn't a long message, but it was enough. I could feel that same sense of relief in her words that I felt in mine. It was like we had both finally let go of the weight we'd been carrying for so long. The truth was, we didn't need each other to heal. We just needed to heal on our own. I think that's when I realized that real growth doesn't always come from fixing everything. Sometimes it comes from letting go and trusting that the right path will unfold, even if it's not the one you expected. Months passed, and it felt like everything was slowly coming together. I wasn't where I thought I'd be, but I was exactly where I needed to be. I'd built a new life for myself, one where I wasn't trying to live up to anyone's expectations, not even my own old ones. I'd stopped chasing some version of success that didn't really belong to me, and instead, I started creating something that felt more real, more authentic. I was content with where I was in life. I wasn't rich, I wasn't a CEO, and I didn't have the flashy career or the perfect relationship I thought I needed. But I had peace. And that was enough. I had a job that I no longer dreaded, and more importantly, I'd started to enjoy the little things again. My mornings were no longer a race to get to the next thing, they were moments I could savor. I took time to appreciate the simple act of being alive, something I hadn't done in a long time. I also learned something important, that real happiness isn't about what you achieve or how you measure up against others. It's about finding satisfaction with yourself, with the journey you're on. I wasn't the man I thought I would be, but I was becoming the man I was supposed to be. And for the first time in a long time, I could say that without feeling like a failure. One evening, after a long day, I sat down with a glass of wine and just reflected. I thought about Emma, about the life we'd had and the life I had now. I realized that breaking up was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the best thing. It gave me the space I needed to grow, to rebuild my self-worth, and to understand what really mattered. I still think about Emma from time to time, but it's different now. I don't feel sadness when I do. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons she taught me, and for the love we shared. I learned that sometimes, love isn't about holding on, it's about letting go so that both people can grow. And I think we both did. We both found our way. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that life is a journey, not a destination. And sometimes, the hardest moments, the ones that feel like the end, are actually the beginning of something better. I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to keep moving forward. And now, for the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that's enough for me.